Hello, friends, and welcome to Nerd News, with all the news that's fit to nerd. I'm here with special correspondent Tom McGee.
Thank you, Ryan. Happy to be here in the field.
I'm special correspondent Ryan LaPlante. We're living our best lives, and we are going to run you through the last week of October 2024 and all of the nerd news that we have seen in our various nerdities to help you be as caught up as we are, because we needlessly and obsessively read all of these articles to know what is going on, and we'll just share the interesting ones. Tom, what have you got? I'll throw to you first.
So, kicking off with video games, the age has come again after what I learned was like a 10-year gap between Inquisition and now, or something ridiculous, 8-year gap. We have a new Dragon Age. The Veilguard has dropped. It is out. It is out in the world. Some of you are likely playing it already. Ryan and I have not. So we're here to talk about that. So Ryan, are you excited? Are you a Dragon Age guy? What's your take on Dragon Age?
I have played a fair bit of Dragon Age. I played a ton of Dragon Age 2, and then I played Inquisition through to the point where I became an Inquisitor plus about 12 hours, 2 or 3 different times, where then I've learned, I have about a week to completely obsess over a video game before stuff pulls me away for 3 weeks, and then I couldn't remember what was happening. But I'm a big fan. The production on this one has been much more of an interesting question.
It's been all over the place. Yeah,
they basically let the whole team go, which is why some of the criticism of this new Dragon Age from the outside, again, we're talking criticism before the game even dropped, was everybody looks like a Fortnite skin of their Dragon Age character. And it is a little, shall we say, more cartoony and more fun. I am excited to dive back in. I know from just articles that have posted about the ending of the last game, so I'm interested to rejoin. But are you a Dragon Ager? What age is your dragon, Tom?
My dragon is old enough to rent a car. I went hard on Dragon Age because it was available to me before Mass Effect, I think. I couldn't get Mass Effect. I didn't have an Xbox, and I really wanted to play Mass Effect. And I couldn't do it, but Dragon Age came out, and my PC at the time, I bought what I was calling a gaming PC, but was actually like an off-the-rack Staples, which is, I don't know if you have Staples in the States, folks, but like it's just a very, yeah, they do. They make jokes about it in the office. Staples, just a big shitty box store of like everything is bad and overpriced, but like if you need toner, it's the only place in the world that sells it anymore. So I bought an off-the-rack gaming PC at the end of university, which was about as good as that sound made it sound. It was absolute fucking garbage. And so trying to run Dragon Age on that, it was like a laggy mess. But because it had the pause between actions thing, I was able to chug through it. And I was mostly okay until the final battle. And then I had to drop down to easy difficulty and just like chug through it because there was so much happening that my computer couldn't run anymore. But I've always loved BioWare's world building. I got really into the Grey Warden idea and the Blight. I was like, that's such a rad way to start a game. So loved Dragon Age 1, felt deeply in love with my characters. I loved their take on dwarves. I thought it was so cool. Just the house cat that gets outside and like looks up and is like, the fuck no. So just loved the idea that dwarves were like, the sky? No. And I was playing a dwarf, and I loved like the dwarf intro was so good. So yeah, I was all in on Dragon Age 1, and I played all the DLCs, and I was super hyped for 2, and then 2 felt like a kick in the dick to me because I was so into that beautiful world building and like really that laser focused story. And 2 jumps all over the place. They introduced, it was much more action-y.
I started with 2, so I never played 1.
So 1 felt more like almost a top-down RTS, not quite, but like in that ballpark of like team management and stuff. And then 2 was just straight up, like I've played a rogue all the way through. And 2 was like, you're Captain Stabby. Stab as hard and as fast as you can, which incidentally is also how Mass Effect moved, right? You had Mass Effect 1, which was like a lot more kind of tactical and janky. And then 2 was like just a really solid shooter on top of all the great story. And it took me a while to appreciate what Dragon Age 2 was doing. The time jumps were really interesting. The way it was moving politics was really interesting. There were some great characters. Obviously, Varric shows up for the first time and becomes like MVP of everyone's heart. But I just couldn't connect to Hawk the way I connected to my dwarven Grey Warden at all, really. So I played through it, and I was a little bit let down. So when Inquisition rolled around and was like, we're trying to merge the two, I was like, all right, let's go. I was also pissed off by a lot of the design decisions. Speaking of character design, the shift on Kunari design from 1 to 2, where they become very demonic in 2, it led to a lot more interesting story possibilities. But I was like, no. Like it was a little bit like when Star Trek Discovery did New Klingons.
I was going to say they rebooted the Klingons. And are like,
that's it. I'm like, no, man, we know what these guys look like. You stop this. But based particularly on where 3 goes, it's like, oh no, you really wanted to lean into like, this is why they're pariahs. They literally look like Tim Curry in Legend. Like, they're not just like little guys with horns, like little itty bitty baby like goat horns. It's like motherfucking ram's horns, you know? So anyway, Inquisition rolled around. I was really into the idea of it, started playing it, did not like the arm business, felt gimmicky to me and weird. And I thought I was nearing the end of it, or midpoint or whatever. I wasn't really connecting to the characters the way I wanted to be. I was grinding it. I wasn't enjoying it. And part of it was I hadn't played The Witcher 3. And the whole time I was playing it, I was like, this seems to just be trying to capture that magic, and I haven't played that magic, and is this going to ruin that for me? Is all the innovation of that going to be lost? So I put it down, left it alone for a long time, but it was an unscratched itch. Finally went back to it and realized I was not near the end. I was about to get the castle.
Yeah, that's why
I
was like, castle plus a day. That was me like, ugh.
Oh, this is a much bigger game than I thought. But I started getting really into the set, like the running of the Inquisition, like getting everyone around the map.
I think factions, map management, like a lot of building up to scale. I love what Dragon Age does.
Well, and I started getting into the companions more too, because the lack of connection I was feeling was because we hadn't reached the part where they let you connect to anyone yet. So when I hit that next part, I was like, oh, now we're really getting into these people's lives, and it's interesting and fun and weird. So I had a great time with that. Shout out to my boy Iron Bull and his sweet embrace. So when I came back to that, I loved it. I had a great time. I used the soundtrack to Finding the Castle and to the DLCs for a lot of our D&D sessions. Like it's my like pump up music for Dum Dums, and I love the note it ended on. I was like, that's a cool place to leave the story. And then I heard the next one was going to be a game as service, Destiny style, whatever the fuck, and I was devastated. And that's where this game, for those of you who don't know, that's where Veilguard began, was, live service games were all the rage, and the idea was that following the Inquisition, it would be you wouldn't be able to get the drop on the big bad because he knows what you look like. So you got to just get some random people to pull missions for you, and I was like, we are going to hell. Like, this is just Anthem.
Luckily, they've walked us back from this. Thank God, over time.
Well, Anthem tanked, which really saved the day. Anthem was BioWare's other big
MMO.
Kill
the Anthem, save the world.
Truly. So they walked that back, and then they announced Dreadwolf as the title, and they were like, it's a direct continuation of the story. Got super jazzed about that, and then they fired most of the team and were like, actually, now it's called Veilguard. And I was like, oh, God, no, they're walking it back. To their credit, they knew me was in the audience, so that first trailer's like, no, we're picking up the threads. Don't worry about it, but here's how it moves forward. So I'm really excited. I'm genuinely interested in a way I didn't think I would be. I like what I've been seeing from the reviews. I was already let down by the art style in the second one, so I don't really give a shit that they're all like wacky now. I'm like, yeah, you already broke it, so that's fine. Break it again, I guess. But I don't know. I feel like the Blight was such a fucking good storyline that it's almost impossible to match that.
Yeah, we're gonna have to see how it goes. I know I'm definitely gonna play it. I imagine you are too. We might stream some of it, but we will promise a future deep dive episode where we will do a review of Dragon Age.
Yeah,
the Veilguard,
70 hours from now. No, Ryan and I known for our
2027
massive ability to carve out personal time away from work. Let's just crank out a 70-hour
just
RPG.
Casually on the side. Casually. No problem.
Yeah.
I'm seeing
on my phone.
I imagine you wrote this one in, Tom, because I don't know this in our rundown. Call of Duty is back?
Yeah. So Call of Duty is an interesting thing. It makes more money than all the movies in the world. Like it is a behemoth of a franchise. And I have a real love-hate relationship with Call of Duty. I know Tyler does too. In that, for me, like I enjoyed some of the multiplayer stuff, but again, not being an Xbox kid, didn't have a lot of room for that. And then when it moved to PlayStation, my buds and I would do like LAN parties. I got real into it for a bit with the first Black Ops. I was doing very good at multiplayer. My buddies and I would play all the time. It was excellent. And then it started, much like a lot of, as was the style at the time, moving into sci-fi bullshit. And every game suddenly became Destiny Light, where it's like, suddenly you can fly and you can do all this. And meanwhile, like, Titanfall 2 is just sitting in the corner being perfect. And everyone's like, out of the way, asshole. Like, it was very much that meme of the guy, like, looking over his shoulder at Call of Duty. Well, like, the perfect game is there for that kind of gameplay. But anyway, kind of lost its way. But what I really enjoyed and I know I'm in the minority here, I love the single player. I really enjoy, like,
early
World
War II Call of Duty was where I actually played the game.
Yeah, well, and even, like, the Modern Warfare games for me, I was like, fuck yeah, you're doing something here. You're commenting on, like, the atrocities of war. You're giving us different perspectives. I was like, this shit's good. This is really, really good. And then they went into, like, mech suits. They did the one with Kevin Spacey as the lead.
That's aged so well for them. That's why they keep bringing him back over and over again for the franchise.
Right, yeah. Yeah, and he keeps tapping his ring on things and being like, you came here to play some Call of Duty.
His crossover with Marvel, just Kang and Spacey, just leading them both into the future together. Jesus Christ.
House of Kang. Modern Warfare. So, yeah, they kind of lost their way. And I haven't played a lot of the more recent ones. The multiplayer's been kind of all over the place. They moved into a battle royale thing. People who love it. Everyone else is kind of like, oof, stay away. The most recent one was an expansion. They decided to make a full game with predictable results. So they've been kind of in the doghouse for a bit. And they just released Black Ops 6, which is an insane thing to say. Because in my head, that's still like, it came out yesterday. And what the hell are you talking about? But by all accounts, Call of Duty's back. People are really digging the multiplayer. The single player is, again, refocused on an interesting time period. And the way the team approached it was that each level is meant to feel like its own blockbuster film. And I'm like, that's all I want.
Nice.
I just want to play like 6 hours of action movies that are great. I don't want any bullshit filler nonsense. And it sounds like this is all killing, no filler. So Call of Duty's back, everybody. I'm playing Cold War, the one I didn't play right now, which is doing some weird shit. It has dialogue options, which I'm like, but that lead nowhere, but just to talk to people, which is super weird. Despite picking a lady, they gave me a dude's voice, which is really funny to me. So anytime I'm like lifting up through a window, just, which is delightful. So yeah, having a time with that. But I'll report back. It's on Game Pass, so that's how I'm going to get my fix, because I haven't paid for a Call of Duty game in a decade. But I'm excited to dig back into that. I'll report back. That's
can't wait
my
to
bullet
hear.
point there. Then I have one more quick video game hit, which is a new patch is coming out. Halo is adding a third-person mode in a desperate attempt to gain users back, which is like neat. But I had this moment when they announced it of kind of going like, what fucking game is this anymore? Like, Halo to my mind, as again an Xbox-less kid /teen/adult man, was like, Halo's the first-person shooter. It does it better than anyone else. It's incredible. And now they're like, please come back. Here's third-person mode, which cool. And again, it'll help, like, from an accessibility perspective. You'll be able to play it. It's great. It's just so weird to me that what I consider the first-person shooter is now like, also this, please come back, which I don't know. Infinite's is strange. I played a lot of the multiplayer when it came out, but what are your thoughts on third-person Halo?
To me, it feels like the Halo universe falls into the same category as Gears of War, which is it almost has the potential to be this great multimedia franchise that just doesn't seem to hit the same traction as, for example, a Fallout has in terms of, here's the model war game. Oh, here's the RPG. Oh, here's a highly successful television franchise. Oh, it's got a lot of legs. Halo, it feels like it was the number one thing in the game, and there's such value there, but they haven't quite cracked how to get to the same level of dominance that like a Call of Duty has in that first-person shooter space. So then you're just like, okay, what'll get people in the door? What'll work? I don't know. They have the Paramount Plus series that people who play Halo are kind of not watching or see it and are like,
season 2.
Yeah, this isn't Halo. And it's a weird thing where I'm like, the challenge for me from the outside, even trying to draw me back in, is I'm like, I don't know who Halo Spartans are. They're like Doom Guy, but they don't say cool stuff.
Honestly, pretty accurate depiction. Yeah, because I played through the first 3 finally, because I could, having bought an Xbox Series S, which is just a lovely little gaming system. Like Master Chief's a cool character, but cool in a neat in the scenario he's applied to. And I think the show ran into that problem, which is like, if you want to build that guy out, like, he is the line he is saying as he's kicking ass. He's not, I don't want to see his home life. And a lot of Halo's best story is kind of tucked away into corners, which is part of the joys of those games, but that also makes it hard to slap on a multimedia. Like Fallout's very easy, right? It's like the world is awful, but quirky and fun. It's like, all right, that's very clear. Halo's like, you're a space marine, there's enemy aliens, but also ancient technology, but also, like, it's stuff that's fun to discover over the course of a game. It's very hard to just kind of hand to you.
Yeah, it's tricky when you have to find
similarly, like
when you have to find a reveal every 20 minutes. It's a real challenge. Yeah, I think there's fun there. I don't want to watch Duke Nukem do his taxes. I was going to say, but then I realized I kind of do want to watch Duke Nukem do his taxes. That'd be a good time. But
hail to the decimal, baby.
I mean, if they can get Halo to the point that it's as fun as Gears was, I haven't had a good Gears game in a while that's caught my real flair. I was so into Dom and Marcus and that original plot and the Outside novels, and I thought it was so great. And then they generation jumped, which makes perfect sense because you're like, we've basically solved this. And I was like, I'm Marcus's son. I'm like, cool, man. I don't give a shit.
Well, are you excited about the new one that's dropping, E-Day?
I will have to chase down an Xbox to be able to play it, but yes, absolutely.
Will you? Xbox is going pretty cross-console these days because Microsoft lost the console war.
Perfect. Bring it to PS5 and I will, because I play anything. I usually would burn it down in a weekend or two with a friend. So, Tom, if you got 3 days, just come over. We'll play through.
Well, I don't know if I'm going to be able to find time in my busy Dragon Age Veilguard schedule, but I can try.
It's time to shift over to the show business segment. Tom Knows Games. I track too much about Hollywood. I am very excited immediately at the gate for the deepest nerd cut. I'm aware there are things that are more accessible, but I'm going to start here, which is I started off with Ding Dong, the Witch is Dead, and then I was like, I don't want to say that, so I tried to make it more correct. Ding Dong, the person who froze Hollywood solid is leaving. It's far
Which person who froze Hollywood solid is leaving?
Carol Lombardini is stepping down as the Alliance of Motion Picture and Television Producers president next year. So we had the big Hollywood strikes last year that locked down all of production. So every writer in Hollywood was posting constantly about how Hollywood is terrible. Then every actor went on strike, and they ended up overlapping, and it shut down production in Hollywood for almost a year because of the biggest concerns were over AI in terms of writing, in terms of replacing jobs. But they'd also had some battles with the Writers Guild in terms of what they call like mini rooms and cutting down on the amount of time writers were there. But mini rooms meant like, oh, we're not going to hire a full writer's room. We're going to hire 4 writers. None of you ever go to set. Write them as quickly as possible. The show sucks. We don't care. And the Writers Guild was pushing for bigger rooms, more dedicated time, livable wages, all that kind of stuff, which producers just hate. They make more money than anything. They're making so much money when you're looking at Netflix or Amazon, all the big streamers on top of that. And the AMPTP was this organization nobody knew of outside of Hollywood. Nobody really heard of them. But it is essentially the equivalent of a union, but for mass negotiations of all the big companies and studios and streamers. So when the Writers Guild goes to sit down, it's the AMPTP who sit down on the other side of the table and go, we're representing the entire business world, because you're not going to cut you're not going to cut a deal with Paramount that's different than the deal with Warner Brothers, that's different than the deal with Netflix. They all sit down as well and basically draw a line in the sand and say, this is what we're offering, but they do it as a group. Otherwise, negotiations would be a nightmare for the employer and honestly probably better for the unions because you could inch everybody down. Carol Lombardini led the negotiations that froze up Hollywood for a year and basically is why we're only starting to see new good movies now, where there was just that dearth of everything, and then weird independent films that got a ton of promotion for some reason. That was all because of that. So she'd led the AMPTP for 15 years, and of course they posted all of their very nice messages. We're incredibly grateful to Carol for her many years of leadership at the AMPTP and wish her the very best in her retirement. But she's stepping down immediately after the unions have gone to war. The AMPTP's name was in all the trades as the villain of the story. And it's been reported that she was sidelined from all of the negotiations currently going on with the Animation Guild, which are not as high attention drawing as the Writers Guild or the Actors Guild, who solved out. But the Animation Guild is apparently in protracted negotiations because they are the most concerned about AI because it's directly replacing artists at all points. Right. And the studios are pushing back hard. But the AMPTP was like, do you know what, Carol? Why don't you why don't you sit this one out? You've done great for us in those last two that were a disaster, but how about you go over to the corner? Oh, Carol's retiring. Who knew?
Great. That sounds like really good news for all involved. Although, like, maybe not, because maybe someone more competent will come in and be worse, or is the hope that someone better will come in?
I think the hope is I don't think it would be tough to find a worse strike season than the previous year, which is they all got burned enough that the CEOs had to physically come into the negotiations and sit down and take over. Where
you don't want that.
The CEO of Netflix, the CEO of Warner's, and a bunch of them had to attend and sit at a table opposite the union. And I'm like, if you have the association to represent producers and they cannot close a deal, you got to switch that up, because you don't want to have Hollywood locked down. You both want to fight as hard as you can. Producers want to pay as little as possible. The performers want to make as much possible as they can, while keeping business moving forwards. Because it also devastated crews. It means everybody was put out of work while it was happening. So you definitely don't want that to happen again. And I've got more entertainment news upcoming. I've got stuff about The Running Man. We're going to talk Matlock. We got Back to the Future 4. We got Skeleton Crew. We got some tabletop news. But before we can get into any of that, we got to take a quick commercial break right here. Welcome back. It's time for us to talk about The Running Man. I have Matlock and Back to the Future 4. They're tremendous things, but I'm sticking with The Running Man. I am so excited about this. Tom, what do you know about The Running Man in general?
So I had never seen The Running Man. To my great, there's a whole bag of like 80s action movies I should have seen, but just didn't because I was squeamish about gore when I was a kid. And Running Man doesn't really have any of that, but I think I just grouped it in with like, I don't know, it might be too hardcore. So I was house sitting for my parents a little while ago, and I was working on I forget what I was writing. It was like a D&D thing. I was doing some planning. So I decided to just like watch some of these 80s movies. I went and got a pizza and just like Home Alone with the dog, no kid around. And I watched The Running Man, and holy shit, what a delight. What a delight that movie is. So fun, so weird. I fucking love a Schwarzenegger as everyman. It's always so silly.
Yep.
I think The Rock trying to play like just an average one-legged vet in the Skyscraper movie was worse. But like Schwarzenegger as average Joe getting wrapped up in shenanigans.
Oh, average ridiculous. Joe American is my favorite.
Yeah. It just happens to have the accent. Don't worry about it.
Nice to be here from Ohio.
We all talk like this there.
I'm a garbage man.
I built these muscles lifting the heavy garbage of the 80s.
Caring for my son and wife.
But no, I loved it, man. I love a good dystopian thing. The game show element's wild. It's just all over the place. The fucking villains. Oh my God. I had such a great time. And so they said they were doing a remake. Like, I live in fear of the RoboCop remake, or like Total Recall Colin Farrell remake, where it's just like dead serious, doesn't understand it. But they're like, Edgar Wright presents. I was like, okay, baby, we're in. And the cast looks amazing. I'm fucking over the moon about it, right? How about you?
We've been slammed with cast. So I actually am a purist. I read the book is how I got introduced to The Running Man. Because they will call this a Stephen King adaptation. But it's actually a Richard Bachman book. It was early on in his career, and Stephen King wrote, I think, 4 novels under the name Richard Bachman. And he intended to write as Stephen King and write as Richard Bachman, and never the two should meet for his entire career. He has talked about how he wrote in character as Richard Bachman. And one of the statements about Richard Bachman is like, he lives in a coal town and he's not a very nice guy. So these are bleak books with Stephen King being like, I'm a nice guy writing my normal books. Now I'm going to get mean. And you're like, Stephen, it's real scary already. He's like, you thought it was scary. Now I'm going to write books. And some of those books are fully out of print. He wrote a book that was, honestly, it was a school shooting book from the shooter's perspective. It might be, I think, Bachman's first book. It's pulled. It's gone. He yanked it. It's gone into the world. But The Running Man rules. The Running Man is incredible. The Long Walk is incredible. I think he did another one called like Roadwork or something like that. Don't worry about that one. But The Running Man.
If I can interject for a hot second, The Long Walk is actually a core Ryan Tom memory. for me because Ryan and I were hanging out a bunch in my final year at university. We were in a play together. That's where we really got to know each other. And at one point, we were talking about sci-fi novels, and this exact conversation was happening. And Ryan, you were good enough to lend me The Long Walk, which is like a collected short stories that was called something else when Bachman was the label on it, but that's the preeminent story in it. And then we didn't see each other for like 7 years. And then, like, when we did start hanging out again, I brought that book back to you at a bar or something. And I was like, Ryan, I have this book for you. And you looked at it and you're like, oh, yeah, no, I have this. Like, I've read this. I have this. I was like, yeah, this is yours. You were good enough to lend it to me at Queen's. And now we're in Toronto and I need you to have this back. So I've always associated that book with you. So it's very appropriate that we're talking about it here. But anyway. Continue.
But yeah,
Running Man.
The Running Man novel is actually completely different than the film. You could basically consider them two separate ideas other than the Hollywood movie that came out in 1987, which starred Schwarzenegger, as we mentioned, and was directed by Paul Michael Glasner of Starsky and Hutch fame. Basically took the back cover of the book and went, oh, a regular guy in a dystopian America goes through a game show that might kill him. And then never read the book. They just rewrote the whole thing to take place in the building. It's basically it's clearly playing on like American Gladiators and a bunch of other things from that time, which for the record is beautiful and I love it. It's not the book, but it is a lovely time. The book I've always thought should be a movie. It is so much grittier. It is so much uglier. It is so much meaner. American society, it's set in 2025, which is perfect. Thank you for putting this out next year. Looking forward to that. But everything has gone so terribly that it's basically a dystopian future. There is a guy who is not even a particularly nice guy. He's married to his wife. They are both very, very run down, still care for each other, but it's not a perfect marriage or any of the traditional Hollywood tropes. They have a daughter. She's super sick. They're running out of money. And he decides to go to the network television building in his area where they run these tremendously dystopian game shows to make money. One of them, if I am remembering correctly in the book, is they run everyone through a medical test to figure out what their weaknesses are and then put them into these game shows where their weaknesses are featured. So there's one that I think is they put people who have heart problems on a treadmill and they start asking them questions. And every time they get a question wrong, the treadmill speeds up and they go until they win the game or have a heart attack and die. And
Holy
that is
shit.
the level of ultra bleak.
So it's like a Saw, pre-Saw obviously, but like a Saw level of like, I'm targeting your specific
100%. Broadcasting it to
that.
America, everybody loves this. And The Running Man is the #1 show on the network. And this lead guy goes in, he has physical and psychological testing, and they're basically like, you're borderline a psychopath. You hate everything. You're fit. You have nothing wrong with you. We want to put you on The Running Man. And The Running Man is the #1 rated show. And it is, they basically take people. Each week, they take 3 people, and they put them on The Running Man. They run a portrait of them, and they run it everywhere. And they let those people out into the world. And the Running Man is whoever's running. They have a 24-hour head start where they go and they do whatever they need to do, but their face is plastered everywhere, and they have to send in these little video clips by mail that get dropped anonymously, like 3 times a day, or they don't get any money. And if they can make it, I think it's 30 days, they get $1 million. Obviously, you'd have to scale that up for now, but that's the idea. Yeah. Only the network releases a team of bounty hunters and murderers to go hunt these 3 people down where they are in society. And the big clincher to the game is anyone anywhere can call in with a tip. And if your tip that you call in with gets the person killed by the hunters, you get $10,000. So it is weaponizing society against these people who are running out. He goes through the program, and they like doctor photos of him and bring him out, and they make him angry on air, and it's clear they just make him look like an absolute psychopath, and he's just kind of normal, down on his luck Joe. And it starts off with him running. He's trying to figure out where he can hide, who will take him in, who's going to sell him out, how can he blend in. He's trying to stay, and at one point in the story, he realizes too late he should have stuck with other poor people because they weren't going to sell him out the way regular society does. But he kidnaps a woman on the road that he just needs to get out of an area. And she's like a rich lady who's like, well, you're a piece of shit. He's like, no, I'm not the thing on TV. That's not the deal. And she's like, yeah, you're trash, you're trash. And she tries to pull over to get the cops to take him. And the cops shoot at him and her. And she realizes the world is crooked. So they have this weird team up where she is his hostage, but also playing this out with him. It is a crazy good story. It deals with the hunters. It deals with the consequences. It has, before a certain day in September, it had an incredible ending that since September 11th would not be incredible anymore. I don't know how you changed this ending because it was perfect for the book, but there's a lot of stuff going on. But I was like, oh, a gritty, real, dealing with societal consequences, dealing with the dark sci-fi of this would be amazing. And then when they announced the reboot, I was like, what are we going to get? Edgar Wright. Okay, we could be leaning into cartoon. I'm laser. Bleh. Or we could be leaning into the book. And then all of this cast dropped, and I have high, high hopes, but I still don't know which movie it's going to be. Because it's going to be directed by Edgar Wright. This is coming out August 1 of 2025. And the screenplay is by Michael Bacall, who did 21 and 22 Jump Street, and he did Scott Pilgrim.
Wow.
So there is like a strong Scott Pilgrim reunion going on this, because Edgar Wright is Shaun of the Dead, Hot Fuzz, Baby Driver, all that kind of stuff. But the cast here is crazy. So it's going to star Glenn Powell as the lead, who I'm hopeful about because he is the, like, he's so hot right now guy in Hollywood.
And I fucking love him, man. I'd only seen him in Top Gun Maverick, which was incredible, and he was great in it, and I hated him. I'm like, this guy's such a piece of shit. And I saw him on red carpets and stuff, and he's like goofy and self-effacing, and I was like, oh my God, the promised land. Like, you're the guy who is that handsome, that charismatic, can be a complete asshole, but is willing to go there, and then is also nice off screen. I'm like, oh, yeah,
and he was
all day.
Pleasant in Hitman. He also starred in Anyone But You, the Sydney Sweeney surprise romantic comedy.
He's also Twisters.
Yeah, but that made $220 million in January. Crazy.
Yep.
Like,
and as it turns out, she only took Madam Web to finance that. She is a fucking genius. And
they both turned down 3 times the budget from streamers, being like, no one will care about this movie if it streams, and teamed up to be like, it goes in theaters. Like, they know what they're doing.
Hell yeah.
He's got Tom Cruise's blessing, and he's like, nah, I'm not going to live in Hollywood. I'm going to go live in like Texas. I'm not interested in being here. Just the perfect PR team. But it means there's going to be big focus behind this film, and then the rest of the cast is crazy. Josh Brolin, who's been in everything good, has been announced as the ruthless producer of the show. Katie O'Brien, who was also in Twisters, she was the bodybuilder in Love Lies Bleeding, the Kristen Stewart lesbian romance thriller. She's also going to be in Mission Impossible. She's another contestant, which is great. So we got the 3 contestants getting released if it's matching the book. Lee Pace, who's Ronan from Guardians of the Galaxy, more
importantly from Pushing Daisies.
Well, there you go. He's also in Apple's Foundation. I don't know anyone who's watching that, but he's in that. He's just that guy. He's playing the chief hunter for the network, which is a perfect role for him. In the book, he's described as a nerdy, sort of like bookish, running the team, very capable, but as much an executive as he is like an actual hunter. He's got gun people with him. And Lee, I feel like I want to watch Lee Pace punch. I keep wanting to say Glenn Howard, but it's Glenn Powell.
Take this, Dennis.
Amelia Jones is back from Scott Pilgrim to continue the reunion. Yeah. She's also in Lock and Key. She's playing, as they say, a privileged woman blind to the oppression of the government. I'm like, I hope it's that kidnapping lady. Then there's Michael Cera coming back as a naive rebel who tries to help Glenn Powell. And William H. Macy just plays a man who helps Powell. But
hell yeah.
The greatest risk of this film is that it has too many famous people in it to be good.
I don't know. I appreciate a film, and I think Edgar Wright's the right guy for this, because even something like Baby Driver didn't use everyone all the time. Similarly, Scott Pilgrim didn't use everyone all the time. He had some, at that point, not quite A-list, but on their way up. And if they weren't needed, they just weren't there, which gives me hope. Last Night in Soho, similarly, like to the grittiness, that film is a lot less waka waka. So yeah, I don't know. I'm pretty jazzed. This sounds very good.
If we get manic, high-energy video game segments and gritty realism of action on the street, we will have the perfect combination of Edgar Wright at the helm of this film, and I'm very excited. But yeah, there's that. And then Matlock, which I messaged you about, Tom, being like, have you seen the new Matlock? We need to mention that this is happening.
And I had not. Up. And then I went and watched it, because of course I did. And I got to tell you, that is a show for the remaining owners of cable and me. Because I fucking loved Matlock. So the premise, of course, for those of you who don't know, the original Matlock, aside from Abe Simpson, you're like, Matlock, was a procedure, like a reverse procedural about like a super folksy, like, I don't know nothing about the law kind of guy who would always get you on the stand. So you had Perry Mason, where it was like a lot of like, figure it out right before the case or like to the side of the case. And Matlock's thing was always like, that all the tropes of the the lawyer getting you to say I did it and I do it again on the stand was like pure Matlock. And as many of you may know, or those of you who don't know me too well, I was born and raised on Murder, She Wrote, and Diagnosis
Thomas, who
Murder,
she wrote about,
and like all these things. So yeah, you give me an elderly woman solving shit, I am there for you. And Kathy Bates is literally just playing her office character. Like she's basically playing, was it Joan?
I'll look it up.
The owner of Sabre. But yeah, so the tone of the show is very, and I've only watched the pilot. The tone of the show is very like slightly lighter or goofier Good Wife, if that makes sense. So it's still a lot of that like legal jargon. Everyone feels a little bit like a community theater actor in the best way. Like there's a lot of like, call them and tell them I'm not ready to settle. But you know what? If they raise it, I'll consider it. I'll pay for your coffee. Like it's that level of like everyone's just kind of doing shtick.
Everyone's Catherine Hahn in Parks and Rec.
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah, that's a pretty good pull. Yeah, very much that. So you're going in on that. What's interesting is she's not the lead prosecutor or anything. She is working for a prosecutor. So it's very different. They lampshade the Matlock thing out of the gate where everyone's like, Matlock, like the TV show? And she's like, just like that. But the first case is interesting. Despite it being kind of in that light, goofy lawyer tone, they're like investigating some heavier stuff and slowly teasing out heavier and heavier stuff. And she's not, over the course of this investigation, she isn't coming across as, again, in my old ladies who solve mysteries. Miss Marple is an Agatha Christie character I always took issue with because Miss Marple never really solved anything. She'd just walk around and then eventually go like, oh, this reminds me of my great nephew's former roommate and this exact thing happened to them, so you're the murderer. And it's like there's no satisfaction in that. And what I was worried about with this is that it would be more of that, where it's like, well, what you guys don't understand is back on the farm, if you found this kind of dirt, it meant the murderer. And it's not that. They are doing a lot of the like, old folks still got it. So it's very like, it's a very boomer friendly show. There's a lot of jokes about old TV shows that people do or don't remember. But and spoilers for the pilot of Matlock, I had my fingies crossed the whole time that we were going to get at something a bit deeper than this. And sure enough, they Mr. Roboted at the end where she's like, not this doddering, like, oh, I don't know thing. She is on a mission to destroy the legal firm she's working for to revenge her daughter who died as part of the opioid crisis. And it's fucking rad. And it's like, they show her fucking up a bunch while trying to pull this off. She's undercover, but while she's undercover, she also has to solve the cases and like contribute to the firm. But she's convinced one of the three people she's working for is responsible. She's going to take him down from the inside out. She's actually super rich. And she's putting on, she literally chose the name Matlock to disarm people because she could make jokes about the TV show Matlock. So it's this weird meta, like it's not a reboot. It's not a continuation. It's like a show that takes Matlock as its premise. Like she's Peter Parker if she got bit by Matlock, which is fucking great. So I am all in. I love it. I'm thrilled with it. Kathy Bates is fucking great. The surrounding cast is fine, but they only need to be fine because it's a lot of that like background character in Suits or like not main character in Good Wife. Anyone who wasn't one of the leads in The Good Wife level of kind of like shticky lawyer.
Well, it's got to meet network TV vibes where it's like it's a little bit of a background show, but with enough plot to get me excited about it when I read about it. And I knew you'd go nuts.
Yeah, and you know, as a show that could very easily just be like boomers are the ones who've got this. There's a lot of that, but it plays well. As that trope goes, it isn't just like she is inherently better than everyone. But the young people are very much there. They're like just a Rosencrantz and Guildenstern, like couple of chuckle fucks who are constantly like, whoa, what? What's Cheers? But then there was a nice reversal where they leave. These guys hadn't. Where they leave like a courtroom or something. She's like, well, I mean, it's great we've got this information we can't get. They're like, oh, I found it. Like I Googled it. We're good. Let's go. And there's, that's very much meant to be the tip to the youngsters, but it is a nice thing to prevent her from being a super genius at all times, which is like, also she hasn't practiced law in a bunch of time and she's also lying all the time. So they're good at letting her fail in order to make the ruse more reliable. So anyway, I had a good time. Again, it's very network TV. So if that's a turn off, like, don't watch, but I think it's going to have a wonderful life on a streamer when it reaches it. But yeah, A+ Matlock. And also Kathy Bates has said this is her swan song. And I'm like, fucking A, Kathy Bates. This is a good way to end a phenomenal career. So
hell yeah. All right. So we're closing the end of our time, but we have 2 more bullet points in showbiz. And I got one more random thing I will share. So let's burn these down and we'll get out of here. Back to the Future 4, Tom. What did you hear?
Okay. So Zemeckis has been on his apology tour for Here, I think it's called, which is Forrest Gump if Forrest Gump was a house instead of a character. It's based on a much beloved graphic novel, and from what I've read, and again, haven't seen it, so from what I've read, works much better in a graphic novel format than in a single position, everyone happens, digitally de-aged Tom Hanks and Robin Wright and a bunch of nonsense. But anyway, it means Zemeckis is out talking again, which is great. Ryan, you put down a bullet point on here too about Who Framed Roger Rabbit 2, which we can talk about in a sec. But I read today, so this isn't technically last week's Nerd News. This is today Nerd News. But he's clearly just doing a victory lap because he's like, oh yeah, the studios are asking me all the time about Back to the Future 4. They want it so badly. And I keep telling them, no, the story is done. There's nothing else to tell there. I'd heard some people pitch a Marty as Doc thing a while back, which could be really great, but it could also be really bad. And ultimately, even as I was pondering through it myself today, I was like, you could do a story about the McFly kids, but we did that. That was literally Back to the Future 2. So I love that he's holding the line. Also, if Back to the Future 3 is any indication, which I loved as a kid, but as an adult, I'm like, you don't necessarily want more, and particularly if it's the Disney version, like I don't need to see Doc being like, I ruined all my relationships and then die in the third act to motivate characters we've never met. And then just at the end, they throw a lightsaber to Marty McFly and he turns around and is like, huh? Like, I don't need that in my life. But he did say he would be interested in doing a musical, which there already is one that's like an unofficial musical that is, I think, pretty successful and pretty well liked. But I was very happy to hear that he was drawing that line in the sand because I love a knowing when you're done. Squid Game, similarly, they're like, we're going to do 2 more like this season and 1 more season and we're done. I'm like, yeah, just keep ending stuff for me. I want a story that's complete, So that's what I've heard about Back to the Future 4. But Ryan, do you think we need another Back to the Future? Are you?
I mean, no, I'm good. Back to the Future, the musical is actually official. It's hitting Mirvish in 2025, so it's playing in Toronto. Great. I bet it's playing elsewhere. So yeah, do that. That sounds better. The news I heard was in regards to Who Framed Roger Rabbit 2, where he said that the script for it is amazing, but Disney will never do it because Jessica Rabbit is too horny for them. They would never approve it. Even look at her in the theme parks. They put her in a trench coat, which I thought was a really funny complaint because they're like, well, in the theme park, she's a private detective too, man. They didn't just put clothes on her. There's a theme around this. And I ultimately think that strikes me as an excuse more than a truth. With Deadpool and Wolverine hitting the R-rated target and hitting more than $1 billion at box office, I think if it's strong enough, it'll absolutely soar. I don't know if there's a big demand for it as a sequel. I think we all love that movie, but for me, I'm like, I don't. Bob Hoskins is gone, man. Yeah. I love Bob Hoskins. If you could bring him back, I'd be in. But
and I mean, it's not to say you can't do more live action cartoon mashup-y stuff.
Also, Space Jam ate it. Space Jam. Well,
I was going to say, like the original Space Jam scratched that itch a bit. Space Jam: New Legacy went so hard on the metaverse / Ready Player One of it all that like, but Adult Miles and I went and saw The Mask for my birthday. It was back in theaters, and I hadn't seen The Mask in years. And walking out of The Mask afterwards, I was like, that feels actually to me like the sequel to Who Framed Roger Rabbit. It doesn't continue the story, but tonally and in terms of the mix of people, Cameron Diaz is literally playing Jessica Rabbit in that movie. Like,
oh yeah,
she's a lounge singer. She's incredible in it. Jim Carrey is drawing from all those cartoon references, obviously throughout the film. So like, do something like that. Give me a different thing that scratches that same itch. But yeah, again, to the like, and for me, with a lot of sequels and other things, I'm like, just don't fuck up the original thing for me. Like, I'm cool if you do other stuff. I'm cool if you have a good take to expand the world, whatever. But like, please don't retroactively wreck a previous thing. Don't
100%.
have Palpatine return, thus nullifying our heroes.
Don't make me tired of a franchise. If I love it,
Yeah.
Give me the good stuff, and I love that. Otherwise, slow down and just give me the great stuff. That's even better.
Yeah.
But talking of Star Wars, Skeleton Crew. The trailer dropped this week for Skeleton Crew that's coming out. It's a bunch of scrappy... I mean, every article is just like, it's the Goonies, but Star Wars. I will admit a sin. I have not seen the Goonies. But I was like, it's four kids getting hauled around by Jude Law. I'm like,
Goonies, but Star Wars. Yeah. Yeah, it's... I hadn't watched the trailer. I wasn't planning on it. I was just going to go in cold. But then, for the purposes of the content, I did. I watched it right before we started this. And oh man, what a treat! What a delight! I fucking love seeing domestic Star Wars. It opens in like Star Wars suburbia, and that to me is always a fascinating corner. And I feel like the Disney shows have hit that a bit. We've seen little glimpses of it in The Mandalorian and other places where it's just like, here are just corners of a non-fucking desert planet where people are just living and doing their thing. And I love that angle. Also, I was grinning ear to ear. I love that they did a Star Wars lyricified version of an 80s song. That's lovely.
Yeah.
But also, for the first time in a really fucking long time, looking at that, I'm like, oh yeah, that's Star Wars for kids. That's great. That's like, do that, please, 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 please. More of that. And yeah, it weirdly is almost the exact same premise as Star Trek Prodigy. So we got to live with that. But again, different worlds. I kind of wish we had Kate Mulgrew in this one too, but I can only use up so many wishes in a day. But no, I'm really excited. I think it looks excellent. It looks fun. It looks like it's got its own tone and
Star
voice.
Wars. I'm like, this is what the TV shows should be. If the big movies have got to be Jedi stuff, like give me Andor and Skeleton Crew. That's the spectrum where I'm like, oh, Star Wars is bigger than just the same thing. And I think it's stepping into, we're going to do smaller, more grounded, grittier stuff. We're going to do more adventurous, weird stuff with these like kids. Expand the galaxy instead of making it feel like it's got to be these same 12 people we see all the time in everything. And it starts to feel big again. The whole galaxy 100%. Starts to feel like a galaxy.
Yeah.
All right. The last thing I want to touch on, Tom, because it's real life, but it also feels a little bit like parody. Have you seen anything about High Potential?
Oh, yes. This is the...
Caitlin Olsen from It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia plays a janitor at a police station who they realize is super smart, so they have her help them solve crimes. It is a sitcom that to me felt like it would be a gig that Caitlin Olsen's character from It's Always Sunny would book on It's Always Sunny. Like, it reads like a Sunny parody of what a sitcom would be. It is one of the biggest successes for the ABC network in years. It's picked up like 220% viewership. It is incredible. It is a show that looks like it was made sarcastically, and I'm sure everybody on it is. I haven't watched it, but it's crushing. She's super charming. I bet it absolutely works. What a funny idea with the title High Potential. It sounds like it should be a weed comedy. Like, I don't know how they came to any of it.
Well, and I'm very excited. She did I forget what the name of the show was. She had another show a while back that was basically shameless by the Mick. It was shameless by way of Always Sunny, and I think it just hedged too close to Always Sunny to like feel like a breakout role for her. So I'm super jazzed she's doing this. Again, these are shows built for me, specifically for me, where I'm like, oh, is solving mysteries, but you're not the detective? Are you a local crime writer, perhaps? So I'm thrilled to watch it. What I find interesting is there's been a spate of these in the last little while, because there's a Canadian one called I think it's called The Cleaner, where it's like a dramatic version of this where the mob hires a lady to like clean up crime scenes basically for them, and then she gets embroiled in a bunch of stuff. And then there's also, speaking of Good Wife, the Elspeth character has her own show now where she is a detective and solving crimes. So I feel like there's been there's clearly, it's in the zeitgeist. It's clearly something people are interested in. And I love it because, again, that's one of my favorite, like, procedural genres is like person with skill set X is applied to crime
Problem
cases
Y,
in a fun and interesting way. And it's refreshing that it isn't the version we had of this a while ago, which was like smarmy asshole dude solves all crimes with your bull, etc. It's like this is nice. I like this for her. I like this for Dee, because I think you're right, Ryan. I think Dee has escaped into our world and has found her way onto a show. So yeah, I look forward to watching it when I'm done Matlock. I've got a bunch of episodes saved up on my cable box.
You have to eat your Matlock before you get your high potential. That's
okay. Well, maybe that's what the contribution I can bring to this show is I will bring a Matlock update every week. Matlock watch. How close is she?
Incredible. Yeah. That's all we were going to get to this week. So we have burned down video games. We have burned down showbiz. We didn't even get to tabletop or toy box. We're going to get there.
We'll do that next week. Ryan, before we bounce, what's one nerdy thing you're excited about this week that you're going to get up to? What's a nerdly pleasure?
Silent Hill 2. Silent Hill 2, the remake. I have been playing that with Del. We're going to keep on burning that one down. I need to know what happens with James and the letter he received from his dead wife. What about you, buddy?
Just go to Silent Hill. It's going to be fine. For me, this week, this is very nerdy. There is a toy store in Oshawa that I deeply love called Comic Alley Toys that I found by accident once and now have just gone back to frequently. And basically they post on Facebook where they have new shit coming through, and it's like an estate sale. It's like someone just sold their entire fucking collection of these guys. So I'm taking the day off tomorrow. I'm taking baby Miles. I'm packing him up in the car. The zoo is pretty close to this toy store, so we're going to go to basically a toy store estate sale and then go to the zoo. But I'm slowly building out different action figures. I'll share these on screen at some point. Action figure spaces around my desk, so this is going to fill some major gaps for you. So that's the joy of like basically doing American Pickers, but for action figures. So I have to go dig through some bins and see if I can find the Vulture from Spider-Man. So that's my nerdy excitement for the week.
All right, yours is cooler than mine. I'm going to work harder for the following week.
Admittedly, I also want to finish the old Silent Hill 2 on stream. So we're both got to find out what happened for good old Hard Luck James. You know.
Perfect.
Cool.
All right, that was the news. We will see you next news time with more nerd news for nerds.
News long and news.
Perfect. Thanks for tuning in to Nerd News. This series is produced by Dum Dums and Dice, edited by Ryan LaPlante, and our audio is mixed by Laura Hamstra. You can follow us on any social media platform at Dum Dum Dice. Support us on our Patreon at patreon.com/dumdumdice, or buy cool merch from our website, dumdumdice.com. Thanks for joining us, and stay nerdy. Dum Dums and Dice has to give a special thank you to the supreme beings of our Patreon at this time: Christopher Little, George Dolby, Gavin and Abby McDonald, Logan, Fire Unfriendly, Grandma Likes D&D, Alan, Stabby Stranger, Glitch Trick, Flynn1138, Alarain Okapi, Schrodinger's Pepper, Madre de Gatos, Lady Maiden, Mithrian, Garbo Ape, Sam Schaefer, Waffle Marine, Dagger Rain, Rob L., Dia De Los Hoodless, Squishy Werewolf, Remy Funky Head, Accent Therapeutic Services in Florence, Kentucky, Lael, Shulzari, The Long Family, Jordan Oliver, Richard Wright, Brittany Fenwick, Alex Parr, Dragonfly, The Body Barrelers, Megan Werner, A Man Out of Time, Curtis at FingerTechRobotics.com, Panda24NN, Shendra D, Your Homeboy Bones, Ellis Hatch, Odigenous, Beef Not Cheese, Kai Koa, Squire Solaire, Sandy Sassy Pants, Adam, Amira Lockhart, James Molina, Nick Hemsing, and Jill and Noel LaPlante. If you want your name to be added to this list, you can join our Patreon too at patreon.com/dumdumdice. Thanks to them, and a little bit of thanks to you.